Mommy, the car is drinking the water. Make it stop.
Stop.
Anita's voice, usually a bright and constant chatter, was pitched high with a terror I had never heard before. I gripped the steering wheel of my battered sedan, my knuckles white against the dark plastic. I was Wendy Foster, and in the back seat, my 6-year-old daughter was watching the brown, muddy river of the flash flood rise against her window. I was 9 months pregnant, and every
the
few
baby
minutes,
is coming.
a white-hot
Mommy,
bolt of pain shot through my abdomen, reminding me that I was running out of time. The engine gave one final, choked sob and died. We were stranded. I looked out into the gray sheet of the storm, feeling a level of helplessness that tasted like copper in my mouth. Then, out of the deluge, he appeared. A massive black SUV cut through the current like a predatory shark. The door swung open, and Seung-min Nam stepped out. He didn't look like a rescuer. He looked like a shadow that had taken human form. His dark suit was tailored to a lethal edge, and as he stepped toward us, an umbrella held firmly in his tattooed hand, I saw the intricate ink of a dragon's tail coiling up his neck. "Out, now," he commanded. His voice wasn't unkind, but it carried the weight of someone who was used to the world bending to his will. I scrambled out, clutching my stomach, while Seung-min reached for Anita. I expected her to shrink away, to hide behind my legs as she usually did with strangers. But as the light from his dashboard hit his face, the sharp jawline, the haunting, cold eyes, Anita went perfectly still. She didn't move. She didn't cry. She just stared at him, her mouth hanging open in a silent "oh." "Mommy," Anita whispered, her voice suddenly steady and eerie. She pointed a trembling finger at the silver ring on Seung-min's hand, the same ring I had only ever seen in the blurry, final photo of my late husband, David. "Mommy!" "I know him. He's the man from the secret box. He's the one who took Daddy." The world seemed to stop. The roar of the rain faded into a dull hum. Seung-min's hand froze on the car door, his gaze snapping to my daughter with a flash of something that looked dangerously like guilt. If you believe that some meetings are written in the stars, or if you think some secrets are too dark to ever stay buried, hit that like button and subscribe to our pack right now. We are diving deep into a story of fate, forgiveness, and a love that burns slow enough to melt even the coldest heart. And before the storm hits, tell us in the comments, which city or country are you watching from, and what time is it for you right now? I was Wendy Foster, and I was about to go home with a man who might have been my husband's killer. But with the bridge washed out and a new life fighting to be born, I had no choice but to trust the dragon. Before the storm turned my world into a drowning landscape, my life was a quiet routine of survival. Being a single mother to a 6-year-old like Anita meant my day started at 5:00 a.m. and didn't end until the last dish was dried and the last story was read. Anita wasn't just a child. She was a tiny, vocal force of nature. She had my curly hair and her father's inquisitive eyes, and she never met a silence she didn't feel the need to fill with a question. "Mommy, why do birds fly south? Do they miss their houses? If I give them my crackers, will they stay?" She would ask these things while I leaned over the sink, my back aching from the weight of the new life growing inside me. I had been alone since David passed 3 years ago. He was a hero, they said. But heroes leave behind empty chairs at dinner tables and boxes of photos that are too painful to open. I had tucked those memories away in a cedar chest in the attic, what Anita called the secret box. I didn't realize she had been sneaking up there, studying the face of the man she barely remembered. Money was tight. I worked as a freelance bookkeeper, balancing other people's fortunes while I counted pennies for our own. But we were happy. We had our small apartment, our Friday night picnics on the living room floor, and the promise of a new baby brother or sister. "We're a team, right, Mommy?" Anita would say, patting my stomach. "Me, you, and the little bean. We don't need anyone else." I believed her. Until the afternoon, the sky turned the color of an old bruise. The weather reports had warned of rain, but nobody predicted the flash flood. I had been trying to reach the clinic for my final checkup when the clouds simply opened up. As I struggled to keep the sedan on the road, the labor pains started, sharp, rhythmic, and terrifyingly real. I tried to stay calm for Anita, but she could see my hands shaking on the wheel. She could see the water swirling over the asphalt, rising higher and higher. "Mommy, I'm scared," she whispered, her usual chatter silenced by the roar of the rain. "I know, baby. I've got you," I lied. I didn't have anyone. We were alone on a darkening road, the engine sputtering its final breaths, until the moment those piercing white headlights cut through the dark, and Seung-min Nam stepped out of the shadows to claim our fate. The transition from my drowning car to the interior of Seung-min's SUV was like moving from a battlefield into a vault. The door thudded shut with a heavy, expensive sound, instantly cutting the roar of the storm to a muffled hum. The air inside smelled of cold rain, sandalwood, and a hint of something metallic, like the scent of the air before a lightning strike. I was gasping, my wet hair clinging to my face, as I collapsed into the heated passenger seat. Seung-min didn't offer a hand or a comforting word. He simply climbed back into the driver's seat, his movements fluid and precise. His tattooed fingers gripped the steering wheel, the silver ring glinting under the dashboard lights. It was a wide band with a familiar eagle engraved on the side, catching the light every time he shifted gears. In the back seat, Anita was a statue. She wasn't the scared little girl from 2 minutes ago. Her eyes were fixed on the back of Seung-min's head, her small face set in a look of intense, suspicious concentration. "You have ink on your neck," Anita said suddenly. Her voice was loud and clear, cutting through the sound of my labored breathing. Seung-min's eyes flickered to the rearview mirror. He didn't answer. He shifted the vehicle into gear, the powerful engine growling as it pushed through the rising water that had claimed my sedan. "My mommy says people with tattoos are either artists or they have stories they're too afraid to tell," Anita continued, her vocal nature returning. "Are you an artist, or are you afraid?" I reached back, trying to catch her hand as a sharp contraction made my vision blur. "Anita, honey, please. The man is helping us." "I'm not a nice man," Seung-min said. His voice was a low, resonant vibration that seemed to fill the cabin. He didn't look back at her, but his grip on the wheel tightened. "Then you're afraid," Anita concluded with the absolute logic of a 6-year-old. She leaned forward, her eyes narrowing at the silver band on his finger. "That ring, it has a tiny scratch on the side right by the bird. My daddy had a ring just like that, but he went to the stars. Why do you have his ring?" I felt the air leave my lungs. I looked at Seung-min, waiting for a denial, but he remained silent. His knuckles were white. He didn't explain. He just accelerated, the SUV climbing higher into the dark, jagged hills toward a destination I couldn't see. "The bridge to the hospital is gone," Seung-min said, his tone clipped and professional, though I noticed his eyes linger on me in the mirror a second longer than necessary. "My estate is the only place left above the waterline. You're going to stay there until the storm breaks." He caught Anita's gaze in the mirror, his dark eyes meeting her defiant ones. "Stop looking for ghosts, little girl. Sometimes they are closer than you think." As we pulled through the massive iron gates of his estate, the silence between us was heavy, filled with questions I was too terrified to ask, and a strange, magnetic tension that I couldn't explain. I was Wendy Foster, and I was stepping into the home of a stranger who carried my husband's ghost on his finger. The iron gates of the Nam estate groaned as they slid shut behind us, a sound that felt like a prison door locking in the middle of a wasteland. The mansion loomed out of the dark, a structure of cold glass, sharp concrete, and dark wood that looked more like a fortress than a home. It was beautiful, but it lacked the warmth of the life I had built with Anita. There were no scattered toys here, no smell of burnt toast or cheap lavender candles. Seung-min killed the engine. The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by the frantic drumming of rain on the panoramic sunroof. He turned to me, his face a mask of iron, but I caught a flicker of something, a brief, uncharacteristic hesitation, as he looked at my trembling hands. "Can you walk?" he asked. It wasn't a soft question, it was a demand for my strength. I think so," I whispered, though another wave of pain was already beginning to curl through my spine. "I'll carry the bags, Mommy," Anita chirped, her voice bouncing off the high-end interior of the SUV. She was already unbuckled, her eyes darting around the dark foyer of the house as Seung-min opened her door. "And I'm going to find the kitchen. I bet they have giant cookies here. Rich people always have giant cookies." Seung-min actually let out a dry, short breath, not quite a laugh but the shadow of one. "No cookies, little girl, only secrets and dust. Stay close to your mother." He helped me out, his grip on my arm firm and steady. As we crossed the threshold, the motion sensor lights flickered to life, revealing a vast, minimalist hallway. The walls were adorned with monochromatic art, but Anita wasn't looking at the paintings. She was staring at a large, ornate wooden chest sitting beneath a mirror at the end of the hall. "The secret box," she breathed, her voice echoing. "It's an armoire, Anita. Don't touch it," I warned, leaning heavily on Seungmin as he led me toward a guest suite. The air between us felt charged. Every time Seungmin's hand brushed mine to steady my balance, or when he adjusted his long strides to match my slow, hobbling steps, the silence felt louder. He was a man who clearly didn't know how to be a caretaker, yet he was performing the role with a clumsy, intense dedication. He brought me to a room filled with soft linens and the scent of cedar, helping me onto the bed with a gentleness that contradicted the lethal tattoos on his neck. "Stay here," he commanded. "I'll get water. I'll try to find a way to contact the emergency services, though the towers are likely down." As he left the room, Anita didn't stay by my side. She waited until his footsteps faded down the hall before she looked at me with a spark of her father's brilliance in her eyes. "Mommy," she whispered, leaning over the bed. "He has the ring and he has the box, but he looks sad, not mean. Did Daddy give him those things because they were friends, or did he take them?" I didn't have an answer. I only knew that as the storm raged outside, the man in the kitchen wasn't just our host. He was a puzzle, and my daughter was determined to put the pieces together. The lights flickered once, twice, and then plunged the room into a deep, suffocating velvet black. Outside, a crack of thunder shook the very foundation of the estate, loud enough to make the glassware on the nightstand rattle. I let out a sharp gasp as another contraction gripped me, my body tightening in the sudden darkness. "Mommy," Anita's voice was small, stripped of its usual bravado. I felt her cold, tiny hand scramble for mine in the dark. "I'm here, baby. I'm right here," I managed to say, though my teeth were gritted against the pain. A moment later, a warm, steady glow appeared at the door. Seungmin stood there, holding an old-fashioned brass lantern. The light cast long, dancing shadows across his face, making the dragon ink on his neck look like it was moving. He stepped into the room, his presence immediately making the space feel smaller. He set the lantern down and knelt by the bed, ignoring the expensive fabric of his suit as it hit the floor. "The generator is struggling with the flood," he said, his voice lower than usual, almost a whisper to match the darkness. "But the house is solid. You're safe." Anita peered at him from behind my shoulder, her eyes reflecting the lantern flame. "Why don't you have a family, Mr. Seungmin? This house is too big for just one man and a lot of dust." Seungmin reached out to check the temperature of the water pitcher he'd brought, his silver ring glinting. He paused at Anita's question. For a long time, he didn't speak. The only sound was the rain lashing against the window. "I had a family once," he said finally. He didn't look at us. He looked at the flame inside the lantern. "But I thought being powerful was the same as being a provider. I learned too late that a house stays cold if you're never home to light the fire." He turned his gaze to me then. In the amber light, the coldness I had seen at the roadside was gone, replaced by a raw, quiet yearning. He reached out, his hand hovering near my shoulder as if he wanted to offer comfort but didn't know if he was allowed. "Your husband," Seungmin said softly, "David. He talked about you every single day." I froze. The air in the room felt like it had been sucked out. Anita sat bolt upright, her vocal cords vibrating with excitement and fear. "You did know my daddy. I knew it. You have his ring." Seungmin closed his eyes for a brief second, the muscles in his jaw working. "I didn't take it from him, Anita. He gave it to me. He told me that if he didn't make it out of that building, I had to find the woman and the girl who owned his heart. It took me 3 years to find you. And tonight, the storm finally brought you home." The truth hung between us, heavier than the storm. He wasn't the man who took David away. He was the man David had died to save, and he had been searching for us ever since. A deafening crack of thunder punctuated Seungmin's confession, but for the first time, I didn't jump. My heart was pounding against my ribs, echoing the rhythm of the storm outside. I looked at the silver ring on his hand, the same ring I had kissed 1,000 times before David left for work that final morning. 3 years, I whispered, the words tasting like salt and regret. If you knew who we were, why did it take a flood for you to find us? Why did you let us struggle alone? Suman stood up, the lantern light stretching his shadow across the ceiling like a guardian. He walked to the window, looking out at the blackness. I wasn't just David's friend, Wendy. I was the man he was protecting. That fire. It wasn't an accident. It was an attack meant for me. David didn't just save a coworker, he saved a man with many enemies. He turned back, and the pain in his eyes was so sharp it was almost physical. I had to make sure those enemies were gone before I stepped into your life. If I had come to you 3 years ago, I would have brought the fire with me. I spent every day since then making the world safe enough for you to live in it. Anita, who had been uncharacteristically silent, hopped off the bed. She didn't look at me. She marched straight over to Suman and grabbed his large, tattooed hand with her tiny ones. She pulled his hand close to her face, inspecting the ring again. You're a protector, she said, her voice dropping that vocal, questioning edge. Like the knights in my books, they have to fight dragons before they can come home. Suman looked down at her, his stern face crumbling for a split second into something vulnerable. I suppose I am Anita, but the dragons are all gone now. Then where is the secret box? Anita demanded, her hands on her hips. You said there were secrets and dust. My daddy's ring is here. Are his letters here too? Suman nodded slowly. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a heavy brass key. In the hallway, the large chest. He wrote them in the hospital before the end. He made me promise to hand-deliver them when the time was right. I tried to sit up, but a fresh wave of labor pain doubled me over. Suman was at my side in an instant, his hand steady on my shoulder. His touch didn't feel like a stranger's anymore. It felt like a tether. Anita, he said, handing her the key. Go to the chest. The top drawer is yours. The rest belongs to your mother. But be careful, the paper is old and it carries a lot of love. As Anita ran out of the room, her footsteps echoing with excitement, I looked up at Suman. The slow-burning tension between us had shifted. It wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about a debt that was finally being paid in the middle of a storm. The storm outside reached a crescendo, the wind howling like a wounded animal against the reinforced glass of the mansion. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of old paper and the rhythmic, heavy breathing of my labor. Suman remained by the bed, his presence a silent anchor. He didn't offer empty platitudes. He simply held a cool cloth to my forehead, his tattooed hand steady despite the chaos of the night. From the hallway, we heard the heavy thud of the wooden chest opening, followed by the frantic ruffling of envelopes. Then, silence. A moment later, Anita walked back into the room. She wasn't running this time. She held a single, yellowed piece of paper in her hands, her eyes shiny with tears that hadn't yet fallen. She sat on the edge of the bed, her small voice trembling as she began to read aloud. To my bravest girl, Anita, she started. I choked back a sob. It was David's voice. I could hear his cadence in every word she spoke. If you are reading this, it means my friend Suman finally found a way to bring you home. I want you to know that the man holding this letter is the brother I never had. I gave him my ring so he would always remember that he carries a piece of our family with him. Don't be afraid of his shadows, Anita. He uses them to hide the people he loves. Anita looked up at Suman, a single tear finally escaping. He said you were his brother. Suman bowed his head, his shoulders shaking almost imperceptibly. He gave me a life worth living, Anita. I just wanted to give him a legacy worth leaving. Another contraction, sharper and more demanding than all the others combined, forced a scream from my throat. The time for letters was over. The baby was coming, and the bridge to the world was still underwater. Suman dropped to his knees beside the bed, his eyes locked onto mine with a fierce, unwavering intensity. Wendy, look at me. I've spent 3 years learning how to protect. I won't let anything happen to you or this child. You are not alone anymore. I reached out, my fingers lacing through his, the same hand that wore my husband's ring. The distance between us, the 3 years of silence and the miles of flooded road, vanished in that single, desperate grip. The wind screamed outside, but inside the room, the air had turned thick and still. The lantern flame danced, casting a long, flickering shadow of Suman against the wall. He looked like the giant Anita had imagined. but his hands were trembling as he laid out clean white towels. "The water is rising in the basement," Suman said, his voice grounded and low. "But we are on high ground. Focus on me, Wendy, just me." I couldn't speak. The pain was a tidal wave, pulling me under. I gripped the headboard until my knuckles burned. Anita stood by the door, her father's letter clutched to her chest like a shield. She looked at Suman, then at me, her vocal nature finally turning into a source of pure strength. "I'm talking to him, Mommy," Anita shouted over a roll of thunder. "I'm telling the baby it's okay to come out. I told him the dragon is here to catch him." Suman didn't flinch at the word dragon. He moved to the end of the bed, stripping off his expensive suit jacket and rolling up his sleeves. The dark ink on his arms seemed to pulse in the low light. He looked like a man prepared for war, but when he reached out to steady my knees, his touch was as light as a whisper. "I've never done this, Wendy," he confessed, his eyes meeting mine. The stoic mask was completely gone now. "I've spent my life breaking things, but David died so that life could continue. I won't let him down. I won't let you down." I screamed as the final transition took hold. The world narrowed down to the heat of the lantern and the steady, dark eyes of the man David had sent to find us. "Push, Wendy," Suman commanded. It wasn't a cold order this time, it was a plea. Anita began to sing. It was a nonsensical, rambling song she used to make up when we walked to the park, a constant stream of "I love you" and "don't be scared." Her voice filled the gaps between my gasps for air. "He's almost here, Mommy. I can see his hair. He has curly hair like us." With one last, agonizing effort, I felt the world shatter. And then, through the roar of the rain and the pounding of my own heart, came a new sound. A thin, sharp cry that pierced through the darkness of the Nam estate. Suman's hands, covered in the tattoos of a hard life, were the first to catch my son. He held the tiny, squalling life with a reverence that brought fresh tears to my eyes. He didn't look like a shadow anymore. He looked like a man who had finally stepped into the light. "He's here," Suman whispered, his voice breaking. "He's perfect." The relentless drumming on the roof had finally slowed to a rhythmic dripping. As the first gray light of dawn bled through the clouds, it revealed a world transformed. The valley below was still a lake, but here, on the high ground of the Nam estate, the air felt scrubbed clean. Inside the guest suite, the heavy brass lantern had flickered out, replaced by the soft, natural glow of a new day. I lay back against the pillows, exhausted but filled with a peace I hadn't known in 3 years. In the crook of my arm, my son, little David, was fast asleep, wrapped in a soft cashmere blanket that Suman had found in the depths of the house. Suman himself hadn't left. He was sitting in a chair by the window, his sleeves still rolled up, staring at his hands. He looked different in the daylight. The sharp edges of his silhouette had softened. He looked less like a legend of the underworld and more like a man who had stayed up all night fighting for something that mattered. "You're remarkably quiet, Anita," I whispered, looking toward the foot of the bed. Anita was sitting cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by the letters from the secret box. She was meticulously folding them back into their envelopes. She looked up, her curls a wild mess, her vocal energy replaced by a solemn, quiet pride. "I'm keeping watch, Mommy," she said seriously. "Mr. Suman is tired from catching the baby, so I'm the guard now." Suman turned his head, a genuine, tired smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "Is that so? And what are you guarding us from, Anita?" "From the ghosts," she replied, standing up and walking over to him. She reached out and patted his tattooed arm. "Daddy said you were his brother. That means you're my Uncle Dragon, and uncles don't let ghosts in the house." The air in the room shifted. The dragon didn't flinch or pull away. Instead, Suman reached down and awkwardly, gently ruffled her hair. "I suppose I am." He stood up and walked to the side of the bed, looking down at the sleeping infant. For a long moment, nobody spoke. The slow-burning tension of the night had cooled into something solid, a foundation. He reached out, his silver ring catching the morning sun, and lightly brushed the baby's tiny forehead. "The roads will be clear enough for an ambulance by noon," Suman said, his voice regaining its professional clip, though his eyes remained soft. "I've already arranged for the best doctors to meet you at the hospital." "And after that," I asked, my heart skipping a beat. What happens when the sun comes up tomorrow? Seungmin looked from me to Anita, and then back to the child who carried the name of the man who saved him. The fire is gone, Wendy. I spent 3 years making sure of that. From now on, you don't have to be a wall. You just have to be a mother. I'll handle the rest. 6 months had passed since the night the sky fell. The valley was green again, the scars of the flood hidden beneath a blanket of wildflowers. I stood on the porch of a small, sun-drenched house, not a cold glass fortress, but a home with a yard and a porch swing. In the garden, Anita's voice was a constant, melodic stream of chatter once more. She was showing her baby brother, David Jr., how to talk to the ladybugs. You have to be very polite, she explained to the gurgling infant in the stroller. They're very busy people. A black SUV pulled into the driveway. It wasn't the predatory shadow it once was. Now, it was a familiar signal of safety. Seungmin stepped out, dressed in a casual linen shirt that partially hid the dragon ink on his neck. He walked toward us with a bag of groceries in one hand and a small wooden box in the other. You're late, Anita called out, her hands on her hips. The ladybugs were waiting for their meeting, Uncle Dragon. Seungmin smiled, a real, effortless smile that reached his eyes. The ladybugs will have to wait for the final delivery. He turned to me, his gaze lingering with a warmth that no longer needed to be hidden behind silence. He handed me the small box. I found the last thing David mentioned in his notes. He had a plot of land held in a trust. It wasn't for him. It was for this. I opened the box. Inside was a set of keys and a deed to the community garden in the center of town, renamed the Foster Legacy Center. It was a place for families who had lost everything to find a new start. He wanted you to have a place where you didn't have to be afraid, Seungmin said softly. A place where the story didn't end with a fire. I looked at the silver ring still on his finger. And you? Are you done running from the ghosts, Seungmin? He reached out, his hand covering mine on the stroller handle. The slow-burning connection that had started in the middle of a storm had finally reached a steady, glowing flame. I'm not running anymore, Wendy. I'm finally home. As the sun began to set, casting long, golden shadows across the grass, I realized that the storm hadn't come to destroy us. It had come to wash away the masks we were wearing, leaving behind a family built not just on blood, but on the courage to be found. The golden light of the garden faded into a peaceful twilight, and for the first time in years, the silence didn't feel lonely. It felt like a promise. Wendy, Anita, and Seungmin had survived the storm, but more importantly, they had survived the secrets that tried to keep them apart. Sometimes, the person we are most afraid of is the one holding the key to our healing. And sometimes, a hero's greatest gift isn't the life they lived, but the family they brought together after they were gone. Thank you so much for staying with us through this journey. If Wendy and Seungmin's story moved you, don't forget to smash that like button. It really helps our pack grow. And before you go, we want to hear from you in the comments. Do you believe in fate? Or do you think we have to fight to find our own Uncle Dragon in the storms of life? Let us know where you're watching from and what your favorite part of the story was. If you want more deep, slow-burning stories of mystery and redemption, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss a new upload. Until next time, stay safe, stay vocal like Anita, and remember, even the darkest clouds eventually run out of rain. See you in the next one.